All right. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Raw Intuition Health Show. I hope you're all doing well out there. In the comments, if you could please let me know that everything is coming through okay. We should be good to go now. And I'm very excited for today's episode and for today's guest. We've got quite the show for you. Let me pull up our guest's bio here, and we're going to be meeting with Dr. Russell Marz. So Dr. Marz received his pre-medical degree in nutrition from Buffalo State University in 1979, where he pioneered research on antioxidants, something that I'm very interested in as well. In 1983, he received his naturopathic doctorate from the National University of Naturopathic Medicine in Portland, Oregon. He then proceeded to bicycle 10,000 miles around the continental U.S., lecturing on nutrition and naturopathic medicine. He's been practicing clinical nutritional medicine since 1984 and is the medical director of the Tabor Hill Clinic in Portland, Oregon. Dr. Marz began his teaching career in 1988 as an assistant professor of nutrition at the National University of Naturopathic Medicine in Portland, Oregon, and has taught advanced nutrition at numerous medical schools, including the six accredited naturopathic colleges in North America. In 1994, Dr. Marz earned a master's degree in acupuncture and Chinese medicine from Oregon College of Oriental Medicine. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the 6 pillars of vibrant health. So 6 pillars of vibrant health that you guys can put into action in your own life. And there's no better guest to have on than Dr. Russell Marz. So let's get him in the show here. Dr. Marz, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, Matt. As I said, anyone with a name Bennett with 2 N's and 2 T's can't be all that bad. That's my middle name. So
I love it.
To the Bennett family.
Yes, I'm honored to be part of the Bennett family. So thank you for having me. And thank you for sharing your time with us. It's truly an honor to have your expertise here on the show.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
My pleasure. My pleasure. All right. So, guys, as you know, for everyone out there that sticks around to the Q&A session at the end of the show, if you ask a question, you will be put into a random drawing to receive a free gift of mine. You'll get any one of my ebooks that I have here. You'll get to select that ebook. And then you'll also be getting a generous gift from Dr. Marz. Dr. Marz, do you want to share what the guest will, or the listener will win from you?
Yeah. So back in 1984, when I first started practicing, I was out in Montana, and that's where I started up my vitamin company, now called Marz Nutrition Inc. And back then it was Omnivite Nutrition. And so this is what you will win, which is a multi-antioxidant formulation that has tocotrienols in there from Brazil, the Brazilian Amazon. And I'm especially proud of that. Comes from a plant, annatto, which we all need to be doing more of, as many plants as possible. And this was, a love of mine in undergraduate school about antioxidants. And I decided that I wanted to have my own antioxidant formulation. And that's when I constructed my OxyQuench Ultra. It's got milk thistle in there. So if you go out on town and do some things that you're not supposed to, or maybe not as good for your health, this will be something that will protect you a little bit,
Incredible.
Within certain reason. Yeah.
Sure. Terrific. I love it. Thank you so much for offering that and for bringing such a product to the people. Okay. Well, yeah, everybody stick around, of course, and save your questions for the end. If you do put in the question before we get to the Q&A, please put like 3 or 4 question marks before your comment so I can pick it out easily. All right. And of course, it's great to see everybody in the chat. Thanks for hanging with us again through the technical issues as we usually have. So we got Carl. What's up, Carl? Great to see you every week. JJ, great to see you as well. Mallory, what's up? Okay, so yeah, let's dive into the show here, and as we start every show, we just like to get kind of a background on how our incredible guests get to where they are and doing what they're doing. So, Dr. Marz, what's your story on how you got into naturopathic medicine, how you got into holistic plant-based health, and how'd that all go down?
Yeah, so we'll start from the beginning, start from basically my mom. She was the one that got me into this whole mess to begin with. My mom was a what they used to call a health food nut, which is kind of like weird when you think about it. To be interested in your diet and to be interested in your health, you were considered to be a nut, which, she was classified as. So she was a big fan of Adele Davis and Carlton Fredericks. And every morning, since I was tiny, we swallowed a whole handful of vitamin pills. And I used to do so without any water. And, I would show off, of course, as little kids will do.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really good at swallowing all those guys, except for bone meal. Bone meal, that one was used to get stuck a little bit in my throat. I can remember. The vitamin E, that was like, yeah, that's the easy one, a little soft football gel. So I thought about, what my mom had taught me. And originally I wanted to I wanted to be Carl Sagan. I wanted to study the cosmos.
Mm.
I just loved the idea of the universe and how the universe was formed and how he came to be. And while I was, doing my readings, I decided that, oh, uh, that might be a difficult pair of shoes to replace, Carl Sagan. And mostly what he probably does is he works in a laboratory or, basically studying the cosmos. So I wanted to do something that was more hands-on. And so I decided in undergraduate school that, you know what? I'd like to study instead of the infinitesimally large, I'm going to study the infinitesimally small. So I decided that I wanted to do nutritional biochemistry because that's something that we do every day or eating. And why would I want to study everything there was to know about eating and all the nuances and such? And so I decided, okay, first step, I applied to Cornell. Of course, they turned me down. It wasn't quite the Cornell material at that time. And that was T. Colin Campbell was working over at Cornell University. So that would have been a spectacular introduction to nutrition if I had gotten in there. Anyway, went to Buffalo, New York, uh, studied intensely nutrition. Uh, I was 19 years old, and I decided that, wow, the eating of animal products, especially meat, didn't seem very healthy. So I became vegetarian at age 19, knowing, what I knew in school, which was, saturated fats, um, oxidized fats, probably not very good for you. I'm going to eliminate those from my diet. Uh, so that was kind of the very, very beginning. And then, I decided, okay, so I want to study nutritional medicine. And there's no place in the world that I knew of that they did nutrition as a form of medicine. And so all my professors were like, just go to medical school. And then when you graduate, you get done with that. And then, you do your nutritional stuff. And I'm like, well, I don't want to spend my time studying pharmaceuticals and studying, conventional medicine. I want medical nutrition. So I went to school. I was the last person to graduate with a degree in food and nutrition. Most of my classmates in undergrad school, They were dietitians and food service management people. And, dietitians, normally they would work in a hospital setting. And, my teachers would say, well, you just listen to what the doctor says, and then you could add your nutrition afterwards as adjunct advice. And I'm like, well, no, I want the nutritional advice to be the first thing that people hear, not the last thing or just as an add-on. And so I went and did my research and discovered that, and I did the study in the undergrad school on rats, and we were trying to lower their cholesterol with doing a experiment with garlic oil because one of my teachers, my professors, was interested to find out if garlic oil will indeed lower cholesterol. So at the end of the study, we had to sacrifice all the animals, and my teacher was like, "You have to do this." She had a very thick Indian accent. "You have to do this, Russell. This is your project. You have to take care of the rats, and you have to make sure that you do a good job, and you'll have to take care of them at the end." And I was like, "That's crazy." So at the end of this experiment, the results, and we did a statistical analysis, and they were ambiguous. And I just thought to myself, that's just crazy. Why are we using mice to study this? Why don't we just use humans? Give one batch garlic and the other a placebo and see what happens. And so I said, okay, where can I do such a thing? And that's when I discovered the National College of Naturopathic Medicine out here in Portland, Oregon. And I was like, oh, I found my niche. I met at a lecture, I met Pavel Arula, who wrote my first health book, really, How to Get Well. And he was a naturopath of sorts. And he said, when I went to go see his lecture, that they're using his book at the National College of Naturopathic Medicine. And I thought, well, his book, unfortunately, wasn't really that well researched. It was mostly anecdotal stories. And I was a little taken aback by that. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to learn everything that I could possibly learn from who's ever teaching, and then, do my nutritional medicine. And so, then, as you mentioned, I traveled 10,000 miles. We went on a bike tour with 7 other naturopathic physicians. We lectured on botanical medicine and nutrition and natural medicine. And at the end of that stay, I had to decide what I was going to do. And that's when I moved out to Montana to start my practice and also start up my vitamin company. So it was a golden opportunity because it was a place to be where I wouldn't be distracted. And in 1988, is when I moved to Portland, Oregon to begin my teaching career. So I knew that I wanted to teach, but I wanted to get some practice. And so in medicine, so I practiced for 5 years in Montana before moving to Portland, Oregon, and starting as an adjunct professor of clinical nutrition at the National College of Naturopathic Medicine. And then a few years into teaching, I was like preparing all of these notes, and I thought, you know what, I should put these notes into some type of book. And so that's when I came up with uh, my first textbook in nutritional medicine. It's called Medical Nutrition from Marz. And I thought, okay. And then a few years later, 1997 was really when I published the first official full-blown textbook in convention, or I should say in medical nutrition. And, since then, it was a labor of love, I'll tell you, all the research that I poured into that book.
Yeah.
And there's, a bunch of information on the ideal diet, also about, what is the ideal diet. I didn't get so much into the environment, which I'm now much more into. Uh, and so that was basically my beginning. And I thought, okay, let's do this, and let's get everyone on board as well. Let's talk about nutrition.
Wow. That's amazing. Especially the bike tour that you guys did. I think that's really creative and a great idea. The people still do that? Is that still a thing?
No, you know what? Probably is never going to be repeated ever again.
Hmm.
But maybe, who knows?
Yeah.
We were fortunate. We had a couple of the naturopaths where they were, I don't know, very great at getting stuff donated.
Hmm.
So we had, I think, North Face donated a bunch of tents to us,
Wow.
and some other bicycle companies donated some gear. We had a fairings on our bicycles, and and then we had an herb company, Orion Herbs, who basically sponsored us. So we had
Hmm.
a sag wagon, a van that we all lived out of for a period of a year.
Wow.
And, we went around, it was a multi-level marketing herbal company. So they had a bunch of downline people all over the country. And we basically were put up we went camping mostly.
Okay.
So we camped, I don't know, a gazillion times in people's backyards and some of these remote locations, and we gave lectures to the people, and that's where I first got my love of teaching. Was basically uh, doing these talks around the country, and when we got finished, that's when I had in my mind, I'm gonna someday go back to teaching, but let me practice first. But yeah, it was an amazing trip, and it took a year to complete. And I only did actually about 7,700 miles because I had to come back early to sit for the acupuncture boards
Okay.
that were happening in May. So
Nice.
I didn't quite do the 10,000 miles, but 7,700 is close enough.
Agreed. Yeah. Um, just curious, when you did when you were doing your schooling and you had to do the studies on cholesterol on mice, what did you guys use to raise their cholesterol?
Well, I mean, we just had them eat their standard diet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't anything, provocative.
Okay.
Uh,
I wasn't sure
that
if it
would
was
have
like a
been,
high saturated fat diet or anything.
I mean, it was basically rat chow,
Oh, okay.
and then one had rat chow with garlic and the other had rat chow without garlic.
Gotcha.
So I don't remember exactly what was in the rat chow.
Okay.
Uh, but I don't think that it was atherogenic
Oh, okay.
in its nature. But yeah, that's a good question. It's like, we didn't allow for that as far as, stimulating, cardiovascular disease and such.
Sure.
And, of course, cholesterol is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to measuring health outcomes and how healthy you are, which something, it's really important, I think, for people to pay attention to.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. And then also I was just thinking as you were sharing your story. So was your mom? So she was a health nut. But was she more into like a paleo, or not? Probably wasn't called that back then.
Oh, there's no such thing as paleo.
Yeah. Was it just like a whole foods diet?
My mom, she was like, okay, gotta have whole wheat bread.
Uh huh.
So, and she was really into, protecting the bread from oxidizing.
Okay.
So our bread, we had whole wheat bread and it was stored in the freezer. And when friends would come over and we'd have frozen whole wheat bread in the freezer, it was like, that's crazy. Because most of my friends ate Wonder Bread and it was like soft and doughy and just like, wow,
Yeah.
like who really eat that stuff? Uh, my mom, her claim to fame was that she never cooked a TV dinner ever in her life.
Nice.
So she always cooked, and she was a good cook, a basic cook. And we had a fairly limited diet. It was, at that time I ate meat probably 2 to 3 times a day.
Okay.
not even thinking about it.
Hmm.
We had chicken breasts, we had pork chops and lamb chops and roast beef and flank steak and hamburgers. Not so much hamburgers, but we'd have them, on occasion, and hot dogs, but mostly it was like, sort of, naturally oriented type of grass-fed animals. But
Sure.
uh, my mom was not into vegetarianism at that time. Um, but later she began, thanks to me. I sort of converted her. I took the ball and ran. But
Awesome.
she had, uh, we always had to have salad, like salad. I saw your show, Matt, the other day with Chef AJ,
Yeah.
and thought you made some really good points about eating the salad. Make sure you eat that first, and make sure it's a good size. I haven't posted it yet. I just took a picture of what I call a carnivore salad. Was making a joke, and it was about the same size as your salad. It's like, like you go to a restaurant, you get this little teeny little bowl and a little couple of pieces of lettuce.
Yeah.
That's not really gonna cut it. You're gonna do plants, you need to do an abundance of them and a variety of them as well. I think that's really a critical thing. But so, I can remember I hated salad dressing. My mom was, she was Irish, and so she didn't like spices. And, we never had Mexican food. We never had Indian food. We didn't have very much in the way of ethnic foods.
Mm.
Um, but we always had salad, and I would, like we had pizza night on Tuesday night, and I would always, have the salad because my mom said, you got to eat the salad if you're going to have your pizza. And I would stuff it into my mouth, and I would have a big wad of salad in my cheek, and then I'd run out and play.
Nice.
Uh, but salad was something we did every day. And then we took, of course, our vitamins, a big handful of vitamins. That was big. And, I, really didn't eat that much in the way of veggies
Mm.
at that time. I kind of I hated onions, hated mushrooms, hated peppers. I mean, all these foods that now, I can't live without.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting evolution in my diet.
Yeah.
But my mom was one, Adele Davis, she was into raw milk. So we would get raw milk.
Mm.
That was something that she believed was going to be really good for you.
Was it
And
illegal back then, like it is in a lot of
you
places today?
could, yeah, I mean, we had milkmen. Milkmen would actually take milk and deliver it to your doorstep in these cooler boxes. And usually it was on uh usually it was not homogenized, so it would separate.
Hmm.
Uh and the milkmen didn't deliver raw milk. That was something we had to get separate.
Okay.
That came later, but my mom was into that. So it was Adele Davis, and then you learn stuff. It's like, well, maybe that's not the most healthy food to be eating. As Dr. Clapper would say, it's
Mm.
is baby cow growth fluid. Why would humans eat that? And
Yeah.
when we're the only species on Earth that drinks another species milk, after we're weaned away from it, that doesn't make any sense. Anyway.
Yeah.
So that was my background, my mom, and like I mentioned, uh, I became vegetarian at age 19, and at that point I was doing some fish here and there, and I was also doing a fair bit of dairy products, and so I wasn't really vegan at that point. And my parents, they became vegetarian, at that time when I was doing my studies, and they're like, "Oh, okay, we'll change our diet. We'll make this a little bit more holistic, as it
Yeah.
were." So,
Very cool. Yeah, I hear a lot of similar stories. People that are now, influential health educators, doctors. They're a lot of times how their parents started them off was a big influence on them, even though it's not even the same way. Like your mom was just kind of instilling, just having that health focused mindset, right? And that led you to where you are and kept you open minded for things that led you to where you are. So just for the parents out there, I think it's just so important to start the kids off on a healthy with a healthy mindset and healthy diet, and incorporate some of these principles that we'll share today in the show.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, it's a travesty that our educational system doesn't have like mandatory nutrition classes. And of
Yeah.
course, if they were mandated, they would be greatly influenced by various food industries. If your viewers haven't seen What the Health, great movie. I'm in the credits. At the end of the movie.
Oh,
And
cool.
it's just, I think, it's really important for people to educate themselves. And, if the parents are not educated dietarily wise, the kids are not going to get educated properly.
Hmm.
And so I feel like it should be something that should be taught at school. There should be nutrition classes that are mandatory. We had home ec classes, which were kind of a joke, basically.
Yeah.
Everyone was just kind of screwing off there, but it should be like serious. Okay, this is what we're going to do to prevent, the vast majority of people of dying prematurely of heart disease, cancer, diabetes. I mean, JAMA came out with a study a few months ago that half of the adult US population is now either pre-diabetic or diabetic, which is like crazy to think
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
That's like, wow, okay. Whatever we're doing, that needs to get changed because it ain't working, you
Yeah.
know. I mean,
Yeah.
40, I mean, 2018, 42% of the US population was considered to be obese, which like, what? Is
Yeah.
that's like almost half of our adult population is obese. And the statistics have gone up since COVID,
Right.
and that's just crazy to think about. It's like, okay, we got a serious problem over here.
Yep.
Needs to get addressed. We spend all this money on stuff that we don't need, and what we really need is to be educated in nutrition and to be educated about eating the right foods, and also to be educated on the environment, because the environment is a big thing. We can't live without our environment. And as one famous scientist said, we are cutting the limb off of the tree um, that we are sitting on. We're sitting on this limb, we're cutting it off.
Mm.
It's crazy what
Yeah.
we're doing to the environment. And we'll talk a little bit about that with regards to the six pillars of health.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's jump into the pillars here. Before we do you want to just share where the best place is for people to connect with you, follow you, just check out your resources?
Yeah, so I have a marsnutrition.net is something that you can get to us, to me. And I have a new podcast uh, program that I've been doing for the last, few months, and it's called Health Talk from Mars. It's out of this world. And it's on YouTube. So if you Google YouTube, Health Talk from Mars, it's out of this world. You'll be able to get in there, see some of my podcasts, and get into some of the stuff that I'm into. And it's something that teaching is near and dear to me, and that's what I've devoted my life to. Basically, is trying to educate people, inspire people every day. In my meditation, I say, every day I expand in love, health, happiness. Um, I expand in enthusiasm and understanding, and I expand in abundance and success, and I inspire all those around me to do the same. So I try to be a bit of an inspiration for people. When I teach, I usually bicycle to class and start my teaching that way. Just, just a little thing, but it is something. Whenever I travel to conferences, I usually take my bicycle. And I bicycle from the airport. I've been to 23 different airports internationally, and it's something that I just try to demonstrate, like, you know what, you could bicycle. It's kind of a bit of a pain, and sometimes I'm taking my life in my own hands, which is crazy. The last trip from Paris, the airport into Paris, that was a little bit crazy. Had a bit of an accident on the bicycle. I had to bungee my my trailer to the bicycle because it snapped off the bike. Anyway, that was quite an experience. But
Oh,
anyway, I think that most all people need to have somebody to inspire them, and I was inspired when I went to school by a number of, professors. We had Jeffrey Bland. Jeff Bland was an amazing speaker. I mean, he was probably my idol for a number of years. He was just extremely knowledgeable, and it was like, wow, I want to be like him. And since then, I've had many, many uh, professors and many, many teachers that I've learned from, that I idolize. And, Linus Pauling's one of them. Certainly, he brought to the table some really important information. I did a podcast on uh, one of books that was written about vitamin C, The Healing Factor by Irwin Stone. Great book. If you haven't read that book, I mean, I think everyone should read it, just because it talks about how we evolved as a species, and how we evolved probably eating a lot of vitamin C.
mhm.
Uh, Knowing, I mean, it's fascinating to see every mammal on the planet, except for guinea pigs, bats, primates, basically makes vitamin C.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, really? Is that really true? And they make it from glucose, which is like, wow, that's an amazing phenomenon. I mean, glucose, and you just convert that into vitamin C, and then vitamin C gets concentrated in your blood vessels and in your adrenal glands and various tissues, and it's an antioxidant. Again, back to antioxidants. Wow, that's trippy. So, okay, if humans don't make vitamin C, then we need to be eating vitamin C. So let's look at primates and see what they eat. And they eat a tremendous amount of leafy vegetable plants that contain vitamin C. So Linus Pauling believed that you should be consuming anywhere from 6 to 10 grams of vitamin C on a daily basis.
Mm.
And wow, that's a lot of vitamin C. That's like so much more than what the RDA was, which used to be 60 milligrams. I think they upped it a little bit. And the Linus Pauling Institute now believes, well, maybe 400 milligrams is where we should be. But I mean, I think it should be higher than that. Vitamin C is a critical antioxidant for so many different things, for your immune system and such. And, if you haven't read that book, Irwin Stone, The Healing Factor, it's a great book. I have a podcast on it, and it's just like, wow, it's like amazing. Like, the first actual nutritional study, you might be familiar with this. James Lind in 1747 did an experiment. And at that time, thousands of sailors, like going back and forth across the seas, were dying of scurvy. And he decided, okay, we're going to take 10 volunteers, I think it was 10, and we're going to give them oil of vitriol. We're going to give them some horseradish. Another group, we're going to give them, seawater, which that was bad. And then the other ones, we're going to give 2 oranges and a lemon, and we'll see what happens. And literally, in a matter of like a day or two, uh, the people that got the 2 oranges and the lemon, they call them limeys, the sailors in from Great Britain, but it was actually lemons that they ate and oranges. And it took literally almost 100 years for merchant sailors to actually have rations of citrus fruit on the boats
Hmm.
to protect them from scurvy. And hundreds of thousands of sailors died of scurvy transporting oranges and lemons to their destination when they
Really?
could have just eaten them. And the amount of vitamin C that you need to prevent scurvy is like ridiculously small. It's like 3 milligrams. I mean, it's a tiny amount, but that's obviously not optimal. So, we know that, again, when we take a look, if you take a look, a great example is like, and they did this experiment with rats. Sorry about that, rats. I'm definitely anti experimenting on animals these days. So they basically measured how much vitamin C rat normally made, and if you convert the rat to 150 pounds, it was a couple of grams a day. If you took that rat and you threw him into some ice cold water, you let him swim for a little bit, and then you measured their vitamin C synthesis from their liver. Basically, what you saw was it went up to double. And then if you allow them to swim for a period of where they're completely exhausted and they're fearing for their lives, it goes up quadruple. So it's like we know that normally in every species on Earth, um, that we make a bunch of vitamin C to protect us against stress. And it's like, oh, okay. So anyway, that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg there. So, all right. So we have we started the first pillar yet?
Not yet, no, and that's
Oh my
amazing.
God.
You've already shared so much great information, so that just comes shows what's to come. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, let's jump into it, and you can start us off. What's the first pillar that you thought of to bring today?
Well, the first one, of course, is diet. Diet to me, diet is everything. It's if people are familiar with Jim Fix was a famous runner back in the 70s. And Jim Fix's father died of massive heart attack at age 33. And so Jim Fix was like, I am not going to die of heart disease. I'm going to run. And he was instrumental in the running craze in the 70s and whatnot. And he ends up dying of a massive heart attack while running at about age 53. So, and one of the things that we knew was he believed that exercise was everything. And it is one of, the 6 pillars I've listed. Um, but it's not everything. And diet probably trumps exercise. Diet is really a critical component if you are going to be healthy. And then there's all the nuances of the diet. What is the ideal diet? And, I've been talking about this for probably now close to 50 years. What is the ideal diet? And you know, I've transformed, my beliefs over a period of time. Certainly the first thing was, eliminate red meats and such. And then I was okay with chicken for a few years. And then you start learning, well, the largest source of cholesterol in your diet, and then how they care for the chickens, and not very healthy. Not good. So for a number of years, my ideal diet was basically a vegan diet with fish added. So small fish to get omega-3 fatty acids. And that was something that, making sure that the type of fish that you eat is a good fish and it's not toxic like tuna fish or swordfish that have very high levels of mercury in there. And then, um, at one point, uh, I saw this lecture by Richard Oppenlander, and Richard Oppenlander wrote a book called Comfortably Unaware. and also about sustainable nutrition, which we're going to talk a little bit about later. Uh, and when I saw that lecture that he did, and it was all about the environment, and it was all about food and the environment, and he basically showed how unsustainable our food system is, and that if you are not fully plant-based, then you're not really an environmentalist. And there is the Mad Cowboy was a rancher in Montana, and he had, I think, one of the largest cattle ranches in all of Montana. And he made the statement in the movie Cowspiracy, another, I think, a great movie about the environment. And he said, if you're not a fully plant-based eater, then you are not an environmentalist. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty strong statement to make. And if you read, you know, Richard Oppenlander's book, Sustainable Nutrition, I mean, it's pretty convincing in that lecture he did. That was in 2013. And it was a conference that was put on by John McDougall down in California. And I saw that talk, and then I saw him uh, live and in person lecture. And I think it was the grand opening for Cowspiracy.
Mm.
And that, fully made me vegan at that point. I was like, okay, this is how it's got to be. So the next question is, well, what kind of vegan is the healthiest kind of vegan? And can you eat a certain amount of fish to go with that? So I became a big fan of Walter Longo. Walter Longo is a researcher in calorie restriction and fasting. And I went to his first international conference down in Los Angeles. I think it was 2018. And I was like, wow, this guy's very, very impressive, and convinced me that, periodic fasting is one of the definite pillars of optimal health. But getting back to diet, so over the years, of studying, it's not just the types of foods that you're eating, but it's also how you grow them, and it's also how you store them, and it's also how you prepare them. So there's a lot of nuances that goes into just diet, because you can have five same diets and one maybe not so healthy because of how you're preparing the foods and oxidizing them, and not storing them very well. So I think those things need to be paid attention to. I think that's, definitely something that, we all need to do. We all, one of the, as I mentioned in one of my pillars, which we'll get to, that we all need to grow our own food. Like, that's essential. I don't care if you live in an apartment, grow at least some basil, or grow, some cherry tomatoes. Grow something that you are eating. So I think that's a critical component. And I think, the health of the soil is a really critical component. So, certainly we want to go as organic as possible, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. So there's a lot of things that we, again, need to pay attention to. So, I came up, in terms of what is the ideal diet. Now I believe that it's, for the planet, for the environment, and for human health, that it needs to be fully plant-based. And some people hate the word vegan because they think, oh God, vegans, that's immediately conjures up like you know, impressions for people. Like, oh, those vegan, the skinny, sickly, healthy looking vegans. And then, I tell people, well, go watch the Game Changers and then get back to me. And then
Yeah.
we could talk about that. Go read Rich Roll's book on Finding Ultra. So, Rich Roll's considered one of the healthiest humans on the planet. And, he's quite an amazing athlete. And, in his book, he talks about his transition from a pretty unhealthy diet to a completely plant-based, whole foods diet. So whole foods, is a critical component of the diet. So whether, you're going to do completely raw foods, and I think that it's really a good thing to eat a combination of raw foods and also cooked foods, depending upon where you live. I mean, you live in Minnesota, correct?
Yes, yes.
So, and I lived in Montana for 5 years, and raw foods, that'd be difficult to do over there. I think, in terms of the climate, and I do think that we should pay some attention to where we live and, how we should eat according to where we live. So if you live in Costa Rica, you can do much easier to do a raw foods diet over there
Yeah.
as compared to Alaska. That would be a little bit more challenging, as it were. But I was a fully, vegetarian when I was in Montana for 5 years.
Hmm.
But I did eat dairy,
Mm,
at that point,
yeah.
and occasionally some fish, cold water fish. But now, if people haven't seen, oh boy, the movie documentary Seaspiracy.
Mm,
Seaspiracy is another one that talks about the environment and fish and what we need to do to change things. So I have in terms of the diet, I have a list of movie videos that I like people to see.
yeah.
And I also have a list of books, and I'll share that with your, viewers. At the end, we can, post them. And I really like, you know, documentaries because I think that people learn best from observing a documentary. I think if they can be entertained a little bit, I think that's great. And then if you can learn at the same time, uh, that's also great. So I think that's an important thing to combine those things. So one of my favorite books, and I thanked him. His name is Will Bulsiewicz. He
Mm.
wrote Fiber Fueled. And when I was a professor of nutrition, one of my nicknames was, oh, it's Dr. Fiber. And then I was also Dr. Flavonoid, and I was also Dr. Magnesium. So so I used to tell students, if you have any question on a test, the answer is going to be magnesium, flavonoids, or fiber. And you can't go wrong. You
Yeah.
could argue those three things for everything. So recently, back in the spring, I had a debate with a carnivore,
Mm,
and I was like, "Wow, is there really such a thing? Like, don't eat any plants, like zero plants." And yeah, and apparently it's quite a movement,
yeah.
and some people have had some amazing results treating autoimmune disease with the carnivore diet. And I don't deny that that's possible, but certainly over the long term, you're not going to survive very long like that. And I think, one of the things that we should study intensely, which I've done, are the blue zones. So if those people out there, I'm sure your audience is probably schooled in the blue zone. So there's 5 blue zones in the world, and there's 2 of them in the Mediterranean, Ikaria and Sardinia. And then there's Okinawa. And one of the books I recommend is the Okinawa Program by the Wilcox brothers and also David Suzuki, a cardiologist from Okinawa.
Mm,
And amazingly well-researched book. And I had a chance to meet Dr. Wilcox, Bradley Wilcox, at a conference, and we hung out for a weekend, and it was good to milk his brain and see what he had to say. But so we got uh, Okinawa, the 2 islands in the Mediterranean, Loma Linda, Seventh-day Adventists down in California, Southern California, and then Costa Rica. So right now I've been to 3 of the 5 blue zones. Was planning to go this fall to Sardinia. I went to Ikaria, was my last one a couple of years ago, and that was a fascinating foray. I mean, that's why I love nutrition. I just study what people are eating. And when you
Yeah.
take a look at all of the blue zones, so blue zones are areas in the world. So how they came up with the word blue zone was they sent out these demographers. The demographer studies statistics and they get into okay, where are people living the longest in the world? And they zoom in and they get into specific areas within a country and then they circle them with a blue ink pen. And that's how it got its name, the Blue Zones. And so, what we know is that they're not any vegan or fully plant-based blue zone people. However, except for in the Seventh-day Adventists, there's one population which they just happen to be arguably the healthiest of all of the, blue zone people. But when we take a look at their diet, it's mostly carbohydrates and it's mostly plants. They do eat, eggs and they eat some cheese and they eat some meats and stuff, but it represents a very small part of their diet. So we're talking about, maybe once a week, once every 10 days, they're having a little bit of meat. And if they could eat more, they would, but they can't because they're poor. So when we study those people in Ikaria, so Icaria's got a fascinating background to it because at the end of World War II, they exiled 13,000 communists to the island of Ikaria, which is just off the coast of Turkey. You can see Turkey in the distance there when you're on the island there. And so in order for these communists to survive, they had to be kind of like a family and they had to hide and they had to eat food that was present and all around them. So they ate all of these wild greens that grew naturally on the island. And if you go to Greece and you go to a restaurant, you will see on pretty much most all menus a food dish called horta. And what horta is basically wild greens. And, they ate over 80 different varieties of wild greens in their time. So, like, okay, well, that's one of the blue zones. They're eating 80 different plants. That's amazing to eat that many different plants. And my dad was born and grew up in his early life in a place in Trieste, Italy, which, kind of similar in terms of what they were eating, not too far from Ikaria. And, he would eat wild dandelion greens and he would have purslane and just other greens that just grew in the neighborhood. And it's like, oh, well, that's cool. That seems like a good thing that everyone could do. They could grow their own greens, just some of them. And and live off those. And so what we know is, and we go back to Will Bulsiewicz's book, Fiber Fuel. So now there's all this talk about the microbiome. If your viewers haven't watched some of Zach Bush lectures, there's a great one that Rich Roll in his podcast interviews Zach Bush, and he talks about the microbiome. I mean, there's basically 10 times more bacteria in your gut than there are cells of your body. So it's like, wow, really? That's kind of crazy. And how the microbiome is basically formed is through the consumption of fiber, undigestible food. And I do a podcast you can watch on Will Bulsiewicz's book, which I sent him an email. I thanked him for writing the book since saved me from having to write a book on fiber because he does a great job. And so, so this is really a fascinating fact is that we only have about 17 digestive enzymes. And these 17 enzymes come from the pancreas, stomach makes hydrochloric acid, and the small intestinal membrane makes the disaccharidases. So, but bacteria have over 60,000 digestive enzymes. So it's like, really, that's kind of crazy. And so, how do we get these different bacteria that have all of these digestive enzymes that enable us to break down certain plant fibers? So, when we were in school, nutrition school, it was like, well, fiber is undigestible food, and there's nothing that can really happen from it. And since then, now we know that, well, fiber gets broken down, gets converted into short chain fatty acids. I think you mentioned that on your show: butyrate, fumarate, propionate. So all these short chain fatty acids promote the health of beneficial bacteria in the gut. So we know that colon cancer is like an epidemic in the United States. And it's an epidemic because people's microfiber, their microbiota is not optimal. And part of that is from taking too many antibiotics. We are an antibiotic crazy, culture. Oh, I got sniffles, antibiotic. My bladder is a little sore. I'm taking an antibiotic. I got a fever, taking an antibiotic. Well, that's not helping the planet, I can tell you that. And it's not helping the human microbiota. In fact, one course of an antibiotic, like a week or 10 days, can alter your microbiota for up to a year. So think about people that have been on multiple, regimes of antibiotics and what their microbiota is like. And
Yeah.
so this is something that, again, is near and dear to my heart. It's like, okay, well, and there's a great movie about microbiota that I will share with your guests. But and it's, just talks about changing things around. Jeff Leach wrote the book, having a senior moment here. He wrote a book. I mean, uh, he went over to Africa, and he studied the Hadza. The Hadza were an indigenous group, uh, and basically hunting and gathering, one of the last hunting gathering places in the world. And he analyzed their microbiota and found that they were like amazingly diversified and amazingly different than what we have in the States. Excuse me, get a little bit of water here. And what he found is that the children, the Hadza, basically they were consuming anywhere from 100 to 150 grams of fiber a day, which is unbelievably high. And so much so that the children oftentimes had distended stomachs. They were bloated because they were trying to break down this, undigestible food. But as we know, it can be digested if you have the right microbiota. So the average American gets about 11 grams of fiber. So 11 grams, and a lot of people, I have all of my patients do diet diaries. And we have patients that, are consuming maybe 4 or 5 grams of fiber a day. And, over the long term, that's not going to cut it. That's, again, an essential ingredient that we need to include in our diet. And it needs to be diversified. And so I think Will Bulsiewicz said that you want to eat in a week's time at least 30 different plant foods. So at least. So, and that can include herbs. So I think that we don't, pay enough attention to herbs and as a source of important flavonoids and vitamins. So, so aside from fiber, as I mentioned, I'm a big fan of flavonoids. So flavonoids are a group of compounds. Basically, and I think you talked about it in your salad, your your mega salad, uh, that you want as many colors as possible.
Yep.
So, and that's, what I tell my patients. I'm like, if you look at your plate and you took a black and white photo of it and it looks like a black and white photo, you got some problems. That's not going to cut it for the optimal diet. You need to have a diversity of colors, and the more color, the better. So I spent a lot of time going through, some of the nuances. Okay. When I, was studying nutrition, brown rice, macrobiotics, it's
Mm,
good, white rice, bad. Well, now we know, well, brown rice is really not that great. And so I'm a big proponent of forbidden rice
mm,
or wild rice. So forbidden rice is a deep, dark black, and it has a purple color to it. So that means that it has anthocyanidins in there. Anthocyanidins are one type of flavonoid that's really beneficial for your health, good for your eyes, good for your brain as an antioxidant. And, we can't get enough of these bioflavonoids. And, diversifying what you're eating, making sure you eat a very wide array of foods is really critical. And I think eating wild is also important. So, like this time of year, so we have, I live in Oregon. I'm a surfer. I've been surfing for about 50 years now. And one of the things that I do when I go to the beach, at least in the last month and a half, is I eat salal berries. So salal berries are indigenous to Oregon, and they're deep, dark purple berries.
mm.
And so I'm especially a fan of purple. And, purple represents anthocyanidine compounds, which are really important. Bilberry is also another one. So this purple pigment is something that gets put into the retina of your eye. So another, problem with our health is macular degeneration. One of the causes of macular degeneration, I believe, is a lack of these flavonoids, these pigments that get put into the retina that protect the retina against oxidation. So, over the course of your life, you know, your retina is going to oxidize, and you can protect it by eating, a substantial amount of flavonoids. So I take, a pretty big handful of vitamins a couple times a day, just because I think that we should do everything we can to optimize our health and to get more of these flavonoid pigments into our diet. So I take a bunch of different ones, including, as I mentioned, my antioxidant formula that has tocotrienols in there from annatto. So this is an interesting little story. And so one of my colleagues, and she's a famous herbal medicine doctor. Her name is Dr. Jill Stansberry. And she had been going to the Amazon every year and doing these various retreats. And because, we are cutting down the Amazon at the rate of about one football field every second, which is
Insane.
it just breaks my heart to when I think about that. And I said, well, I better go over there and I better see the Amazon before it's all gone. So anyway, I go over there and we go down, drive 8 hours from Cusco, and we go down into the Amazon into a little biological station called Pilcopata. And at there, she takes us and she walks us around the facilities. And one of the things she shows us is annatto. And the annatto, she grabs one of the annatto pods and she opens it up and she has us, take it's like a deep reddish orange pigment, and we were painting our faces and doing fun things with that. Uh, and I just thought, like, wow, annatto could be, a really important nutritional source of flavonoids. Whenever I see colors like that, I think flavonoids. And I'm like, I wonder if they're using annatto medicinally. And my, teacher, colleague, Dr. Stansberry said, no, not, she didn't know anything about that. So a year later, I'm at a conference and I'm sitting across, I have a booth for my company, and across from me is a little Asian guy, and he's got a big poster behind him of this annatto. And I'm like, huh. And no one was talking to him. So I went over one of the breaks and I'm like, hey, I introduced myself. And he was like, starts telling me all about annatto and about how that inside the annatto, this reddish orange pigment contains a important vitamin E source called tocotrienol. And I'm like, huh, tocotrienols. And he starts telling me all the beneficial properties of tocotrienols that aren't in just regular vitamin E. And I thought, huh, that's kind of critical, and how it's really important for preventing heart disease and cancer and everything that we die of. And so I thought, okay. And so at that point, I said, okay, it's time to put annatto in my antioxidant formula. So every few years I upgrade my antioxidant formula, OxyQuench, and I put, some new ingredient in there. And this was the latest one that I put in there. And I'm proud to have this annatto extract in my OxyQuench. So, okay. So we've covered diet. How are we time wise? As you can guess, Matt, I could just keep talking for, days on the subject, which I want to be a little bit respectful time wise.
Yeah, no, I love all the information. Let's see, we are at 12:30 Central Time,
Yeah.
Minnesota time. So, yeah, I mean we're good. I can
Okay.
go as long as as long as you got time for. So, yeah,
Okay. Well, all right. So, all right. I think I covered. So back to the fiber. I tell my patients, I have a handout from my textbook. It's a table, foods with fiber in there. And I said, okay, your job is every day to get at least 40 to 50 grams of fiber. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to be something that's going to pay off. And at the beginning, you can't just go into 50 to 60 grams because you'll explode. So you won't be able to process that much fiber. So we have people out there, the carnivore diet, and then we have, Stephen Gundry is like, oh, lectins are going to kill you.
yeah.
Don't eat any lectins. And I'm like, yeah, that's not exactly how that works. Uh, so the key is to do things gradually and not do things too rapidly, and making sure you're, getting, up to 50 grams of fiber. That's, not an easy thing to do. But when we look at cultures where they're eating a diet that's more than 80 grams of fiber, they don't have any diverticulitis. They don't have any colon cancer. They don't have any diabetes. They don't have any heart. I mean, it's like startling. It's like, wow, that seems like maybe we should be really concentrating our diet on fiber. And as I think they said in What the Health, they were interviewing someone. It's like Michael Greger. He's like, you know, where do you get your protein from? And it's like, protein, that's not the question. The question is, where do you get your fiber from? Fiber, again, should be the paramount thing that we shoot for. And if you're getting all that fiber, you're probably going to get flavonoids to go with it. So it's going to include those things. But again, and then we're not going to get into the nuances of, the fact that, yeah, some people might be allergic or might have some type of sensitivity to a food. And that's true. And I do a lot of work with food allergies. So that needs to take into consideration. But, Theron Randolph, are you familiar? Theron
Mm-mm.
Randolph was the original, back in the 30s, was a um, clinical nutritional doctor. He was a medical doctor, and
Okay.
he invented the rotary diversified diet.
Hmm.
So rotary diversified means that you diversify as much as possible. Well, here's an amazing statistic, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. We eat 200 foods on the planet. There's over 200,000 to 300,000 edible plants on the planet that we don't eat. It's like, huh, really? So, and we have, close to 1 billion people starving,
Right.
and yet there's all of these foods that we're not consuming. So, from a nutritional standpoint, educating our people on foraging for wild foods, I think is critical. As I mentioned, salal berries. So wild berries tend to be smaller in nature than ones that we grow commercially. So the advantage of a small berry is that it has a higher amount of skin to pith, which is the inside of the berry. And the flavonoids are found in the skin of berries. So if you want more flavonoids, you want smaller berries and you want more skin to
Hmm.
pith ratio. So that's an important concept that I think people should pay attention to. So like pomegranate seeds, have a tremendous amount of fiber and also have a lot of skin. So plants make these compounds, these flavonoid compounds, to protect them against ultraviolet radiation. So, and the more the plants are exposed to ultraviolet radiation, the more flavonoids they make. And if we eat those plants that have more flavonoids, it's going to make us more healthy. It's going to protect us against heart disease and cancer and diabetes and all these things that people are dying of. So, making sure we get some wild foods, I think is really great. Diversifying your diet as much as possible is really great. You know, I hate to even say it. I mean, if you want to eat a little bit of meat because for some reason you think you need to have it, which you don't, uh, and that's fine. But the vast majority of what you should be eating is basically plant foods, diversified plants. Uh, and you can make a very strong argument that really the best diet for our health is a fully plant-based diet. And also for the environment. I think that we really, need to pay attention to our environment. I mean, right now, which is another startling statistic, 200 species become extinct every day. So, really? And that's
Yeah.
on our watch. So, this is the highest rate of extinction since the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. Really? And there's a book Elizabeth Colbert wrote, if you want to get really depressed, and it's called The Sixth Extinction. So, we're not we are in this sixth mass extinction. But we have the ability to turn things around. I mean, our human species, I like to think, Bill Mitchell, a famous naturopath, he founded Bastyr University, came out with a statement at a lecture, and he said naturopathic physicians are part of the Earth's immune system designed to go out and fix the planet. The planet's going to be here. No problem. It's going to shrug its shoulders and shiver, and then humans will be gone.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that, you know, we should do everything in our power, our abilities to have our species continue. And maybe not, maybe we should just go extinct. But right now, we're doing a really terrible job. So here's an amazing statistic that you probably know, and your guests there should definitely read this book. It's called Carbon Yoga. Are you familiar with carbon yoga?
I'm not. No.
Oh, okay, great. I get to teach you.
Putting it on my list.
Oh yeah, it's a critical book. I've probably purchased more than 100 copies, and I give them out to patients. on a regular basis, where I think that they need to read it. And it was written by Silas Rao. So Silas Rao is an electrical engineer. So it's great. I'm going to tell you briefly his story.
Yeah.
So Silas Rao is a genius. He is responsible for the reason why we're even doing this Zoom meeting and the internet and all that. He's responsible for making the internet go as fast as it goes.
Oh.
So he was a Stanford graduate, got his PhD there, and they hired him to do this internet stuff. And he was able to, I don't know, do what electrical engineers do, which was make it go faster, because we all want to go faster. And so in 2005, he's living in an 8,500 square foot house in New Jersey, 3-car garage with his wife and his 2 kids. And he watches the documentary, another plug for documentaries, An Inconvenient Truth.
Mm.
And in that movie, that documentary, he's like, comes away, he's in shock. And he tells his wife, Jane, he said, look, I can't keep doing this anymore. I need to work for the environment. We need to do something here. So he sells up his startup company to a little known entity called Intel. So that's a true story. And they do what they do. And he starts lecturing for Al Gore. And he's doing all this research. And finally, a few months into doing his lectures on tour for Al Gore, he's like, hey, Al, how come we're not talking about animal agriculture? Animal agriculture by far is the largest, the largest source of greenhouse gases, methane and carbon dioxide. And we really, really need to be talking about this. And Al Gore said to him, hey, if you start talking about that, people are going to get really confused. They're not going to know what to do, blah, blah, blah. It's like, we can't do that. And then he said, well, Silas goes, but that's the number one cause of greenhouse gas. How could we not talk about that? Anyway, he quits Al Gore and he starts up climatehealers.com and basically educating people on the fact that animal agriculture has the largest impact on our environment of anything, like way more than cars. He believes it's upwards close to about 75%, which is hard to even believe.
Yeah.
But somewhere between 30 and 50% is probably where it's at. And people just don't really get it. They don't get the fact, we talked about antibiotics, right?
Yep.
In the United States, we use 35 million pounds of antibiotics every year. Of that 35 million pounds, 28 million is used in animal agriculture. And so, I did this debate of this carnivore down in New Orleans. And it was very interesting because New Orleans is where the Mississippi River goes. And um, one of the largest dead zones in the world is in the Gulf of Mexico. And for those viewers that don't know her, Sylvia Earle is a prominent scientist, and they did a documentary on her called Mission Blue that you can watch. Very fascinating. And in there, details her history, getting her PhD and categorizing thousands of different species of algae. And it's like, we talked about, there's 200,000 foods we don't even eat, plant foods. Algae is a big source. And that's something that we should be certainly consuming. We shouldn't be consuming fish oil. We should be consuming algae oil because that's where the fish get their omega-3 fats from. They get it from algae. Anyway, another side story. So the blue zone, why do we have this dead zone in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico? Well, the reason is that we have all this nitrogenous waste from animal agriculture that goes into the Mississippi comes down the Mississippi, and then goes into the Gulf of Mexico. Okay. And then that nitrogenous waste causes algae to bloom. And the algae suffocates the water and produces the dead zone. In addition to all those animals, a lot of pigs along the Mississippi. Um, there's also the food that they feed the pigs, basically genetically modified corn and soy, is sprayed with glyphosate. So there's 4.5 billion pounds of glyphosate that's administered in the world today. Most of that is for animal agricultural feed, so soy and corn. So soy's gotten a bad rap just because, most of it's genetically modified. So all that, glyphosate that we sprayed on the crops to feed the animals, when the animals eat it, that goes down the Mississippi and goes into the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, I'm talking to you, you already know all this stuff, but it's like people just don't like get that concept.
Yeah.
Wow, really? That's all going down into and there's a great podcast that Rich Roll does together with Zach Bush, and the effects of glyphosate on your digestive tract and how it increases intestinal permeability, causes leaky gut, and can lead to autoimmune disease. So that would be a great one for your viewers to see. So, there's a movie documentary that just came out. Maybe you've seen it. It's called Eating for Tomorrow. And it prominently features Sylvia Earle.
Hmm.
She's in a pretty good segment of it. And Sylvia Earle is a world-renowned, respected oceanographer. And in there, she documents the problems that we're having with the fishing industry. So, as you know, the fishing industry is not good. And, they talk about this in Cowspiracy, how, like, they interview this, I think he was a PhD for Oceana, and he's describing to Will, um, the guy who's interviewing him, about how fish stocks, if you just take a little bit of the fish stocks and you leave some remaining, it's like your bank account, you'll live off the interest. And, as Kip Anderson said, oh, aren't we like seriously depleted in our principle? Like 90% of all the fish stocks are overfished. And there's in jeopardy by 2048, there's not going to be any fish in the ocean. Like when you think about that, that's what, experts are saying. Uh, there's no way that humans can survive if there's no fish in the ocean. So the solution is like, one, don't send out fishing nets, and don't start fishing these, gazillions of fish that you're, consuming, all the buy kill that happens and whatnot. So, that needs to stop. Again, in support of the vegan diet, really, really critical. But what we have now discovered, and in that movie, Eating for Tomorrow, they talk about it, that when they analyze all the microplastics, there's a very large patch called the Pacific Garbage Patch in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And it's basically this big wad of like plastics and microplastics. So when they analyzed where it came from, comes from fishing nets.
Hmm.
90% of it comes from fishing nets that they fish, and they get all the nets and they cut them and they just leave them, and then they sort of slowly disintegrate, but not really, because plastics are going to be around for many thousands of years.
Yeah.
And all that stuff goes into the fish, and then we eat the fish, and then we get those microplastics. So stop doing that, Don't continue to do that. So, you know, as we're talking about these 6 pillars of health, for me, it's about educating people about the environment and what we're doing and what we can do to reverse our planetary turmoil that's taking place right now. And so, unless we act now, we're gonna, hurricanes and storms and what we can send fires and whatnot. Now routinely this year was actually a pretty good year for here, but in the last 5 or 6 years, it's like every season we've got these fires,
Hmm.
and that's from global climate change, and a lot of that is definitely related to animal agriculture. So making that connection, I think is really a critical component that, is underappreciated. So, and we're not going to go through all the details on that, but just safe to say, the number one thing you can do for the health of yourself and the planet is to go fully vegan and be conscious of that. And then we haven't even talked about the ethics. There's a great book that I'm sure you're familiar with, and her name is Melanie Joy. Melanie Joy is a PhD psychiatrist, psychologist from Harvard, and she wrote a book, Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and Wear Cows. And she has um, a great TED talk. She does like 20-minute TED talk, and she has a picture of a hamburger. It's like, you know, personally, when I see like meat, I don't find it to be like, oh, that's disgusting. I mean, I won't eat it and stuff, but so this hamburger, it's got like cheese, oh man, that was the hardest thing to give up cheese,
Mm. Yeah.
dripping off the sides, and it's lettuce and tomato. And so one of the guests at this, dinner party, it's like, wow, that was so amazingly good. What's your secret? And the host is like, well, the secret is well seasoned golden retriever. And like, what? You know, and it's like, golden retriever, and instantly the brain goes from like, oh man, that was so good, like, oh my God, that's the most disgusting thing I ever heard of. And it's like, well, what's the difference between the dog and the pig and the cow? It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, they're sentient beings. And so that's something that, again, um, we need to pay attention to. And that's, one of the pillars of health. So I was big fan of Ram Dass.
Mm.
And so Ram Dass, for those of you that don't know him, was a spiritual leader, passed away a few years ago. I used to get to see him every year. He'd come to Brighton Bush here in Oregon, this really beautiful retreat center. And, he had one of his last little retreats. He stopped traveling, he had a stroke, was in Hawaii, in Maui. So I traveled over there, and it was about 350 people, and the name of the retreat was Love Everyone. And so it was a couple days into the retreat, and I raised my hand, and they picked on me, and I said, so love everyone, does that include the animals? Oh yeah, that includes the animals. And like, so why are we eating animals 3 times a day here at this retreat at
Mm.
the food place that we're eating at? And they were like, well, there's no answer to that. I
Yeah.
mean, okay. I mean, if we really want to be, evolved as a species, spirituality wise, I think that's an essential ingredient. We need to definitely address that issue. So anyway, and I think that's, we can include that as part of the pillars of health. All right. So let's talk another. So I listed them out here, 6 of them, and that was the first one that we just did, diet.
Perfect.
So so the second one is periodic fasting. So periodic fasting, to me, is an essential ingredient to optimal health. And what we know is that every species on Earth actually fasts, not because they are detoxifying or they want to. It's because, one, they get sick. And when you get sick, you lose your appetite, you don't eat, you're fasting. Two, they can't find food. It happens. Can't find food. They go for a few days without eating. They survive. It makes them healthier, actually. So each time they do their little fast, it makes them healthier. So, Walter Longo in his book, The Longevity Diet, it's great. I love the book. And I kind of love it because it's not vegan, because people like get on me like, oh, you vegan. And, but it's pretty, there's a great interview of Zach Bush and Rich Roll on this podcast. And Rich Roll sort of pushes them and pushes them. And Walter Longo's like, well, I think, he's Italian guy. I think, a pesco vegan diet is the best. And Rich Roll says, well, I mean, now with all these toxicants in fish, maybe that's not really the best. And I think finally, Walter admits that, oh, yeah, a fully plant-based diet is probably the most optimal. So I went and saw him. I mentioned 2018, the first international conference on fasting and calorie restriction. And I was really, amazed at all the research that he has done. And he studied with Roy Walford. You familiar with Roy Walford?
Nope.
Oh man, you're just too young, Matt. That's the problem.
I know.
So when I go back to teaching, I'll be sharing all these resources with my students.
Yeah.
And so Roy Walford is famous because he wrote the book called Maximum Lifespan
Mm.
back in the early 80s. And Max, so the story is that Dr. Walford, he was in the biosphere too, where they did a study. They took people and they put them in this dome that they lived separate from the earth,
Mm-hmm.
outside of Phoenix. And he was one of the 8 scientists that was involved in that experiment over
Oh,
there.
wow.
They kind of calorie restricted, maybe a little too much. Anyway, so he believed, that basically, we have a genetic program. I think this is shared by pretty much all scientists, and all species have a genetic program of what their lifespan is. If they live fully, dogs like somewhere between 11 and 15 years or so. And humans is 110 to 115 years. So the oldest person to ever live with documented papers, I had a chance to meet her, but I didn't get to meet her, was Jeanne Louise Calment. She was 122 and a half. She lived in Arles in
Wow.
France. When she was 120, she said, I have but one wrinkle and I'm sitting on it. So she had a good sense of humor. She actually smoked. I don't know how much she inhaled. And she quit when she was 117. And
Wow.
she quit because she couldn't see to light the cigarette and she didn't want anyone else lighting her cigarette. So she said, I quit. I don't do much cigarettes. She bicycled past 100 years old. So that's good. She broke her hip in
Mm.
an accident and she actually healed. So amazingly. And, 122 and a half, that's a pretty good run.
Yeah.
So, one of the questions I ask my patients on their health history summary is I say, how long do you want to live? How long do you how long do you expect to live? How long do you want to live? So those 2 questions. And the idea is I want people to change around their mindset. And so, if someone dies and they're 100 years old, they actually didn't live to their full potential. They died of something. It is possible to die of old age. Everyone's goal is to die in old age, but healthy, that you got all your brain is still intact, you don't have dementia, you're not in a wheelchair, you're not getting spoon-fed Fruit Loops by a nursing aide in a nursing home. So, people like, I don't want to live forever, but if you could live and do stuff, bicycle, go surfing, do things that you love to do, and you're doing it in a healthy manner, like why wouldn't you want to do that? So anyway, so the goal is not to live forever, but the goal is to live healthy and go out like Thelma and Louise, in a car over the cliff,
Yeah.
when you're 110 years old. For me, it'll be on a surfboard. You'll put me out to sea and the sharks will get me. So I can feed them because, if you cremate yourself, bad for the environment.
Right.
And, we don't talk about that enough because there's a lot of people that are dying and, we want to do that in a sustainable fashion. So, and the best way is either a green burial or some other way that doesn't like toxify the earth.
Yeah.
So periodic fasting. So let me just give a little blurb to that. So in Walter Longo's book, The Longevity Diet, people ask, well, how often should you fast and how long should you fast? And I agree what he says in his book that a short fast is going to be better than a longer fast. And a short fast, what it does, the analogy that I give my patients is you have a you have a train. So here in Portland, we have a train that goes to Seattle. It's about a 3.5 hour trip. And then there's a place before Seattle, Tacoma, which is, a little bit south of Seattle. So you're on this train. The train's an old train, runs on wood. You take the train up to Tacoma and you run out of wood. And now you're like, oh man, we have to get to Seattle. So what are we going to do? So you look around the train, it's an old train, use a wood stove, and you see some broken wooden chairs on the train. You take those wooden chairs out, you throw them in the fire, you get to Seattle. And then when you make it to Seattle, you make brand new chairs, really nice chairs. So now the train is newer than it was when it left Portland because now you have all these nice new chairs in there where the broken chairs were. So that's what happens when you fast. When you fast, the first stage of fasting is you break down all your glycogen stores. Once you break down those glycogen stores, the body looks around and says, okay, I need some more fuel. So it starts with autophagy, that is breaking down intracellular proteins. So those intracellular proteins are going to be older proteins, mitochondria, various types of intracellular organelles. And you break that down for a period of maybe 8 hours, 12 hours, and then you use all that up. That's autophagy. And then the body's like, okay, we don't have anything else to burn, so let's burn fat. So then it starts with ketosis. So usually second or third day, you go into ketosis and you can measure those ketones in your urine. And when your body is making those ketones, it's also making stem cells because it's getting ready for when you come out of the fast. Hopefully, you come out of your fast, and those stem cells are going to go to everywhere in the body to make brand new cells. So as I explain this to my patients, like let's say they're pre-diabetic or diabetic, so one of the things they want to get new is they want to have new insulin receptors because new insulin receptors are going to work better than the old insulin receptors. Most people that develop prediabetes and diabetes basically have a inability to bind insulin onto their receptors very well. So an analogy that I love to use is you're at a big hotel, a Bellagio hotel, and this Bellagio hotel, you have a truckload of people, a busload of people. You bus them to the front. They go in the front door, into the lobby. They go to the front desk. And what do they get? They get a key. So they pay their credit card. They get a key. They go down the hall. They go to their room. They put the key in the keyhole or if it's, flash it over the scanner and it doesn't work. So they go back to the front desk and they, hey, my key's not working. Can you give me another key? So yeah, we'll give you another key. So go down the room, that one works, but then the next time they try, it doesn't work again. So then pretty soon everyone's got 4 or 5 keys in their pocket. That's exactly what happens in prediabetes and diabetes. You have an elevation of insulin. So the key to the room, that's insulin. The keyhole, those are the receptors. So how do you clean those? What makes receptors not work so well? Well, a combination of things. We know that oxidized fats, we know that advanced glycated end products, we know various toxicants can damage those receptors. So once those receptors become damaged, insulin doesn't work so well. As a result, the pancreas, which is the front desk, needs to make more and more insulin. And what we know about insulin is insulin loves to store fat. So once insulin's storing this extra fat, you start making this visceral body fat. So we know that visceral body fat is not good for you. And you can take someone that looks skinny and they can have a significant amount of visceral body fat. So if you or your viewers haven't seen it, there's a wonderful documentary came out a few months ago, and it was about the 21 identical twins.
Mm.
Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah, I haven't actually seen it though, but I've heard a lot
Oh
about
man,
it.
you gotta watch it. I've
Okay.
seen it a couple of times already. Yeah. So Chris Gardner is a famous nutritional researcher. He's actually one of the first scientists to determine how much protein we actually require. And the amount that we require is much less than the RDA for most people. And so he, talks about, the fact that, you know, we the RDA for protein is 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight, and that is 2 standard deviations above what normally is required. So the average 150-pound person really only needs about 23 grams of protein. And so much has been made. And of course, there's a lot of controversy. And you got your carnivore people. And some people are like, oh, we need to have 200, 250 grams of protein. Well, that's bad for the environment because protein takes a lot of resources to make and also bad for your health. Number one association for cardiovascular disease is the amount of animal protein that you consume. So with that said, so getting back to the fasting thing. So you want to make new cells. So that means you got to have stem cells. And when you do a little fast, and it's got to be at least 3 days, that's when you start generating these stem cells. And that's when you can replace those old insulin receptors and make them clean again. And what we know is that when you fast, and there's different kinds of fast, there's juice fasting, and there's water fasting, and there's broth fasting. And so a lot of different ways to peel an apple. So we changed that expression. It used to be to skin a cat. And so we was like, we don't want to skin cats. We want to peel an apple. That would be better. All right.
I like that.
So Walter Longo in his book says if you've got some serious health issues, you may need to fast like once a month even. So someone has cancer, someone has, advanced diabetes, advanced cardiovascular disease. There's nothing simpler and more effective at treating that than to do a short little fast. So if you are mostly healthy, pretty good condition, doing, 2 fasts a year is probably optimal. Again, we're looking to extend health span. Health span is living in older age, but living healthy. So we call that health span. And that's something that we're all striving to do and not to be on a half a dozen or more medications. The average 60-year-old is on at least 6 different prescription items, which
Oh,
is crazy. It's like,
yeah.
okay, that's not so good for the environment because all those prescriptions take a lot of resources to make. Like statins is a great example. In 2012, they sold $38.5 billion worth of statins. And one of their, big taglines was, when diet and exercise don't work, then there's Cresco. And it's like, okay, well, what do you mean when diet and exercise don't work? Well, they don't work when you don't do them. And so if you remember in What the Health, they're interviewing his name is Dr. Ratner, and he's the chief medical officer for the American Diabetes Association. And Kip is interviewing him, and he's like, so is there a diet that the American Diabetes Association espouses? And, Dr. Ratner's like, no, there's no diet. Any diet works if you stick to it. And then in the background, Kip he flashes up on the screen the recommendations that are made by the American Diabetes Association. And they include like dairy products and processed meats and stuff. And I was like, how did that get on there? Anyway, so at the end of the lecture or the interview, Kip's trying to show him a study, and Dr. Ratner's like, "What if diet is what you want to talk about here? It's about diabetes, and then we're done here." And he takes off his microphone and leaves. Well, he gets fired from his position a couple weeks later because he didn't do a very good job with that interview,
Yeah.
and he certainly it didn't look good for, I think, the vast majority of people. Anyway, so I mean, in a nutshell, from a standpoint of using resources, I think it's really, critically important that we eat less. And the best way to eat less is to fast periodically. So in Okinawa, they have a famous expression, and before each meal, they say hara hachibu. Hara hachibu is eat until we're 80% full. United States is hara hachibu times 2. So we eat till we're, twice as full. And it's like, okay. And I'm guilty of that. I'm no angel, but I do, try to espouse one, fasting periodically, two, eating, less frequently. So 2 meals a day. I've been espousing 2 meals a day for at least the last 30 years or so. And it's something that I think, when you're going for a longer period of time without eating, your body gets trained to do well on less. And so I think that's really true. I think less is better. So, um, and fasting is something that, almost everyone can pretty much do fasting. And it's just, you need a guide. And you need to be inspired because, it's no fun. I've done over 100 fasts. I've been to the fasting clinic in Germany, the oldest fasting clinic, Buhinger, uh, fascinating place. If you want to go someplace and fast, that's a great place. True North, which was featured prominently in the documentary What the Health, with that woman. One of the women in the movie was on 18 different medications, and they got off all their medications. Now that was an extended fast. I think she fasted for about 3 weeks. But anyway, the power of not doing anything is pretty powerful. All right. Okay, so we covered diet, diversified foods, periodic fasting, physical activity.
Mm.
I mean, that has to be an essential ingredient. We can't just be, logs. And I think that it's important that on a daily basis, we have some type of physical activity, whether it's walking, biking, do something that you love to do. Like I've done for over 40 years, I've done triathlons. And when I say that, I'm like, wow, that's crazy. So I've done 397 triathlons to date.
Wow.
And so, because every season, you do, maybe a dozen of them. And it adds up every year. And, I didn't really think that much about it, but, eventually I started counting and I got up to 397, then COVID hit and then all hell broke loose. And it was like, oh, so I guess I
That's
should just
impressive.
round it off to 400,
Yeah.
call it even. And, I've been plant-based now for about, fully plant-based for 10 years,
Okay.
9 years. And so I made that conversion, as I mentioned, after seeing Oppenlander lecture and then also his talk at that conference. So physical activity is a critical importance. And so, and it could be just going to the supermarket or the store, walk whenever possible. Bicycle, I'm a big fan of biking. I think that biking is a critical ingredient in a life of a city person. I consider myself small city person. Uh, so I think that, we just get too lazy. Oh, I got to get something at the store, just hop in the car, go down and go pick it up.
Yep.
When you could just as easily, and it wouldn't take any more time to bike there and use much less resources. And you're getting your physical activity in. So, and all that physical activity is going to pay off with your blood sugar. It's going to pay off to, I know used to play a lot of basketball. And I know when I was really physically active, doing triathlons, actually makes your appetite less. I mean, because you can't eat when you're training and stuff. So you have less opportunity. So, but then when I eat larger amounts. So having some type of physical activity, something that you really they love to do. So we now in the last few years we've been playing pickleball.
Mm.
So pickleball is, the fastest growing sport in the United States.
Yeah.
And it accomplishes a couple of things. So we play doubles for the most part. So it's a very social event. So I think that's kind of important. We'll be talking about that as one of the 6 pillars. But, doing something that you love to do, that you like looking forward to doing, as I mentioned, I've been surfing for about 50 years. And so whenever possible, I try to get away to the beach. And in doing so, I get to eat my salal berries. I think they're on the tail end right now. Um, and at the same time, you're also earthing. So that's one of the 6 pillars I'm going to talk about a little bit. But so physical activity, getting if you want to go to the gym, like I go, I'm a member. Now I'm like the old person. I got silver sneakers. And so I get to go to the gym for free. And, me and a colleague, we do a little bit of workout and then we swim. And so we swim, about a mile and, do a little bit of sprinting during that time. So again, I don't even think about it as physical activity. I just do it, a few times a week. I do yoga. I think yoga is a critical component of physical activity because it includes spirituality to a certain degree. And then it also, stretching. So, that's something that if you are not stretching, you will get stiffer and you will be not able to do certain things. And so, if you're not actively doing some stretching of some sort, um, it's going to limit your ability to move. The chances of getting into a car accident are higher because you can't turn your head, people when they get old, they turn like that, So you want to be able to be as limber as possible. You want to be able to fall and not get injured. So practicing falling, I think, is a good thing. So yoga, you kind of do that, you know, you kind of practice getting up and getting down. And that's a simple, important ingredient in physical activity is to make sure that you stretch. So I've taught chair yoga to some patients with Parkinson's disease. And one of the things that I tell them is that, when they travel, it's a golden opportunity to do chair yoga. So you're on a plane, you could easily, just do eagle pose in your seat. When the neighbor next to you in your seat goes to the bathroom, you could do, some stretching, tilt over to the side in one way and get the other way. I always tell people if they're traveling, plane ride, that they need to get up at least every couple of hours. And that's important. And that's an opportunity that they can stretch. So go to the bathroom, make believe they're waiting online, and do a little stretch. You could do triangle pose. I try to be, somewhat subtle when I'm doing that stuff, or reach the ceiling, try to touch the top of the plane, inside, little things like that. I think are really critical. So physical activity on a daily basis, again, walking, biking, doing something that you love to do, playing tennis. If you golf, that's fine, except not great for the environment, especially in desert situations. All right. So I mentioned physical activity and socializing. So I think that COVID has taught us a supreme lesson that we are creatures of social creatures, basically, that need to be with each other. So there was a startling statistic during COVID, the beginning, the first year of COVID, and they found that there was an average weight gain of the people that they, studied, of 29 pounds,
Wow.
29-pound average weight gain during 1 year. And 10% of people gained more than 50 pounds. I just had a patient in the other day that he was like 63 pounds he had gained. And it was just over a few years. But
Mm.
anyway, lack of socialization, I think, is a root of, really of disease. And I think that it's, we don't pay that much attention. I do love to go out to eat. I think going out to eat is a great way to socialize. Of course, I'm very picky about the food that I eat. And, I'm making sure that I get a very diversified diet, making sure that I'm not consuming genetically modified foods. So I happen to live in Portland, which is, home of the foodie. So we got lots of places to choose from. Uh, and I usually make friends with the owner of whoever owns the restaurant. And as a result, I get treated a little bit maybe differently. But I tell my patients, tell them I sent you over there. Make sure they put triple the amount of vegetables in that veggie dish. Mostly, they tend to do too much noodles and too much rice and not enough of the veggies. As you mentioned in your salad, uh, critical component is to make sure you get a diversified number of veggies and you get a lot of them. Don't skimp on them and eat them first so that, the other foods that are more calorie concentrated, you're not overdoing that. So one of the other, aspects that I'm going to include in socializing is going to be singing and also dancing.
Mm.
So I think that those are critical components to optimal health. So I have a video of a couple. So I did a crazy thing. I went to Costa Rica, uh, Blue Zone. That was the first Blue Zone I actually went to. And I took blood from 18 centenarians. So centenarians, someone that lives 100 years or older. And I wanted to study what they were eating, how they lived, and, very social. So the oldest centenarian
that I interviewed and studied was prominently featured in the Blue Zones book,
Hmm.
and her name was Panchita. She lived to 110. So she lived to her biological determined genetic blueprint, 110. And I have a picture of her at 107, and she's dancing with her great, great, great nephew. I mean,
Wow.
it's really, really cute to see. And when you see her dancing, she's not like, in a wheelchair. She's actually like really dancing. I was like, wow, that's great. That's, to me, that essence, that spirit, it's kind of critical. So we have a group of people that we do music night with. So it happens once every maybe 3 or 4 weeks, but it is on a regular basis. And where we sing, like I'm not a very good singer, I'm a fledgling saxophone player, which doesn't go well with the rest of the group, but I try, you know. I think it's important for your brain, and you're making more cells, neurons, connections to do something that you haven't done before. But I think that singing and dancing should be a critical component. So one of the things, um, so I've gone to more naturopathic conferences probably than any other naturopath. And our annual meeting, we usually have about 3 dances during that time. One of them is the official, banquet night, Saturday night. But then usually Thursday and Friday beforehand, there's usually a pretty good dance party. And either we go out somewhere, and it's that vital force, that vital spirit. And so in Okinawa, they call it the moai. Moai is like is a group of people that you're with when you're little, and you stay with them your entire life. And so you share things and you do things together. And it's like, oh yeah, that's the group. And it could be biological family, or it could be just, people that you become friends with and you've bonded with. So that's a critical component. And I definitely like to stress that. So I mentioned, earthing. So earthing is going to be number 5.
Okay.
So earthing, I think that's, to be outside and to get exposed to our surrounding environment is really critical. Hiking in the woods, in the mountains, at the beach, all are critical components. Uh, and it's something that, to commune with nature is definitely something that we all need to do. And that's, one of the reasons I love biking is that it does, you notice things that you would not normally notice if you were driving.
Mm.
And that is a definite form of earthing, being on the road and actually, communing with your surroundings, trees. So when we go, so there's a place that we go surfing, um, and that place that we surf is has old growth trees. And so we name some of the trees, one of them's Morpheus, and Morpheus is probably somewhere around 800 or 900 years old. So
Wow.
we guesstimate. And when we go past Morpheus, we touch Morpheus and we say hi. And I think that is uh, a powerful form of healing, is to do that earthing, is to be in touch with nature, go outside, because it's easy, like you were telling me before, you mostly are at home, and and I see you have a nice plant behind you. That's great. And I think, growing plants, and I mentioned about growing your own food. I think that's really kind of a critical component. And I think that's something that, we can all grow plants. And I think that is another way to do earthing, is to get your hands in the soil. So to generate your microbiome. So, the soil's got gazillions of organisms in there. And that's something that when you touch that soil, and I wanted to make just a little comment. I'm going to rewind back to the dietary thing because just made me think of that. So, and that is, people are like, oh, well, vegan diet, they're going to be B12 deficient and protein deficient, and they're going to be not very healthy. And we know that none of that is true. Vitamin B12 is actually something that comes from bacteria. So back in the day when food was less sterile, we got our vitamin B12 from bacteria. So that was bacteria that had contaminated our food. And so the amount of vitamin B12 that is required is a tiny amount. We're talking 3 micrograms. That's like a tiny, tiny amount. So it doesn't take that much. So, and if you need to take vitamin B12 extra, you could take it as a supplement, not necessary to eat animals, but you can get it from plants. And blue-green algae happens to be a very good source of active vitamin B12. So that's something that there's some controversy over whether or not certain plants that have B12, well, they're just vitamin B12 analogs. They're not actual B12. But blue-green algae, that's something that has been confirmed, basically, that that it has active B12 in there. All right. So, it doesn't take much to earth. As I mentioned, grow your own plants, put them in your room, have a bathroom that's just covered in plants. It's basically more like a greenhouse. And it's great. I love, because I spend a fair bit of time in the bathroom because I eat all that plant food. So, bowel movements are pretty regular and frequent.
Yeah.
So, again, another way that we detoxify ourselves is through our bowel movements. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to mention, which is something that's I think is really critical, is spirituality or some type of connection to a higher power. And we can't say enough about this. And we know in the blue zones, especially what I've observed, is there is always a spiritual component to the people. And it's something that they are, in a community together. We know, like Seventh-day Adventists, I think that's one of the reasons why they live a long time, is because they have that spiritual connection to each other and very family oriented and a lot of socialization. Uh, Spirituality can be different things for different people. So meditation, I think, is a great tool. And you can call it whatever you want. It doesn't have to be called meditation. It could be just called sitting. So every morning I meditate for a period of about 30 minutes to an hour, which is a lot. I mean, I would never, years ago, if you had told me I would be doing that, I'd say, you're crazy. I don't have time for that. I got things to do, places to go, blah, blah, blah. But I make that effort every day to go out and, maybe I cheat a little bit. I do mine in the hot tub and I do my little sayings and I sit there, and one of the things people may be familiar with Krishnamurti. So Krishnamurti has a great little saying that I have up in a frame, and it goes like, when the mind is still, tranquil, not trying to find solutions or answers, neither resisting nor avoiding, it is only then that there is a regeneration. And it is only then that the mind is capable of seeing what is true. And it is the truth that liberates, not our effort to be free. Anyway, so I say that as part of my meditation. And, the idea, and again, easier said than done, is to try to, as Ram Dass would say, think of the spaces between your thoughts. In other words, go to an empty place, go to nothing. So one of the things that I recommend to my patients routinely is to float. So floating is sensory deprivation. So sensory deprivation is like an American way of meditating. So for those of you not familiar, so basically there's a container that basically is filled water, maybe about 14 inches deep. And there's about anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 pounds of Epsom salt in the water. And you go into the tank and you close the lid. You got some earplugs so the water doesn't go in your ears. And it's completely black. It's completely soundproof. And the water is heated to your skin temperature, 94.7 degrees. And you don't feel anything because it's basically isocaloric. And so when you lie down in the tank, and some people can get, claustrophobic. I know I brought my mom into a tank and we had her float with the lid open. So we didn't close the lid, so she didn't get the full effect. And she could use the full effect, for sure. And, the idea is that you're lying down in this water and you push your head against, and you're afraid to sink down below the water because you don't want to get water in your nose and in your eyes and stuff. But as you push against the water, you find that the water pushes back against you. And then you push back against the water, and then the water pushes back against you. Then you just kind of relax. Since you got all that magnesium, 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt is making you like the Dead Sea, buoyant. So you're floating in there, and then you close your eyes, and then you open your eyes, and everything is the same. So you're like, okay. And then you start losing track of time. And what happens is, your ears are just submerged under the water. And then you hear ba-bum, 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 your heart rate beating. And you're like, oh, okay. And then you hear like Darth Vader, your breath. And you're like, okay. And then, you close I usually fall asleep for a few minutes and then I wake up again and then everything is the same. So it's kind of an American way to meditate. So it puts you into a state of theta. So theta is that magical place between, between your thoughts, which, everyone's got, this mental chatter that's always going on. I should do this. I should do this better. I should do this. I got to do that. And that being quiet is a special time. And it's kind of like fasting. So usually when I do my big fast, I do 3 fasts a year. So the big ones in June basically cured my hay fever. Then I had severe hay fever for a number of years and cured me by fasting. So, I usually will float on one of the days that I'm fasting. I think one time I was day 11 fasting on a water fast, and I went into the tank for 2.5 hours.
Wow.
So usually it's about an hour and a half, but nothing of nothing is what I like to say. So anyway, there's an expression that is used, ikigai. Ikigai is an expression used in Okinawa, and that is a purpose for living. So that is a critical component, and the spirituality thing, I think, addresses that. Plan de vida in Costa Rica is a term that they use. Again, it's a reason for living, reason for getting up every morning. So if you don't have that, your ability to be maximally healthy is going to be severely limited. That is a very critical component. And we want to include that as part of the 6 pillars of optimal health. So I think that kind of sums up I mean, certainly I could keep talking for a long time, but those are some essential details that I think if everybody pays attention to that, will be a heavier planet. I should say not a heavier planet, will be a healthier planet, environmentally and spiritually and health-wise. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That was a masterclass in how to regain your health. So thank you. I loved every point, and I even those are things that I was gonna bring up too, but you covered it all. So that's great stuff. So thank you for sharing all that. I was gonna ask, when you switched, I know you said you switched to a fully plant-based diet, like 9 or 10 years ago. Did
Yeah.
you notice any difference in your physical performance, like in your triathlons or anything, or
Well, I
not?
mean, that's a great question. And, so, I mean, obviously I'm older, I'm 68 right now. So, peak of my triathlon career was in my 30s. And, even 40s. I've won a couple of small triathlons when there's not enough people to compete. So that's good. Uh, and, the hardest thing was to give up cheese.
Mm,
I loved cheese,
me too.
Manchego cheese, and I also loved eggs. Oh man, my huevos rancheros was to die for, award winning. And and after you give them up, you realize, wow, maybe I was really addicted to them, those particular foods, and I don't really miss them at all. And one of the things, so we have this it's actually a pentathlon. It's where you ski. You start off skiing, you downhill ski, and then you cross country ski for 8 kilometers, and then you bike down the mountain, and then you run 5 miles, and then you kayak for a couple of miles, and then you finish about a half a mile run. And every year I would do that. That was in May, middle of May. And when I switched to a fully plant-based diet, and so one of the things, that would happen is after this particular event, I would definitely be really sore for a few days. And I'd be like, oh, like moaning and groaning a little bit, getting up, like, oh, yeah, that's really sore, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that I noticed going fully plant-based was my recovery time was significantly less,
Mm,
and I was less sore. And I had a good friend that I would stay with whenever I would do this, and he commented on that. I'm like, oh, wow, that's cool. I like that. Um, as far as performance enhancement, I can't say that it has improved my performance. Uh, I mean, it wasn't really eating that much in the way of dairy. So, I mean, it wasn't that big a change, and I
yeah.
haven't, I've done some, substitutions. Like I made some pesto sauce the other day. And in the pesto sauce, I used a vegan Parmesan cheese. It's called Rio Parmesan, I think it's called. And I mean, it's a great substitute. And I really can't tell that. I mean, it's been so long since I've had Parmesan cheese now, but I can't tell the difference between that.
Wow.
And I think a lot of it's like salty, is one of the ingredients in there, because I don't usually add salt to my pesto. But uh, I'd say the biggest thing is, yeah, I've noticed that my recovery time, my soreness, much less. And I would also say that I'm also more limber.
Mm,
I've been doing yoga for, I don't know, 25 years or so. And I've noticed that I can stretch better, especially like I know when I fast and I do yoga, I'm able to do things that I normally would not be able to do. So that's those are the things maybe I've noticed. But I can't say like, oh man, my performance dropped down, blah blah blah. Like I know in the Game Changers, they talked about enhancing performance. Hey, we want to give a shout out to Novak Djokovic,
Mm-hmm.
which I posted in my Facebook. For those viewers that don't know Novak Djokovic, he's probably the greatest tennis player that ever lived, statistically wise. And, he's won 24 Grand Slams, and he just won the gold medal for the Olympics, beating a 21-year-old upstart who's like could be the next greatest tennis player.
Mm.
And he's 37. And he was not fully vegan for most of his career. First thing he did was he stopped gluten and dairy. And when he did those two things, that greatly enhanced his performance, his ability to concentrate, his stamina, getting injuries. I mean, to be playing tennis at his level at 37,
Yeah.
that's unheard of, And about 6 or 7 years ago, he went fully vegan. And he doesn't like to talk about it that much, but if you go online, you take a look what he's eating. He did eat a little bit of fish 7 or more years ago, but then he became completely plant-based. And man, he is a testimony to what can be done. People say, well, it's not for everyone. And I disagree with that. I mean, maybe you need to have some little bit of fish, or you need to have some kind of meat thing. How much do you really need?
Mm-hmm.
And if we take a look, the omnivore's dilemma, Michael Pollan. So there's a great interview that he does with Kip Anderson, and asking him, what he thought was a sustainable amount of dairy and a sustainable amount of meat that everyone could eat. There's going to be 9 billion people in another 30 years or so, 25 years. And Michael Pollan said, I don't really know, but hey, it's not much. And, it's probably going to be maybe a few ounces once a week. It's like, okay, so you're going to sacrifice the planet by raising all these cows just so you can have, a couple of ounces of dairy and meat once a week? That's crazy. And that's not gonna benefit you. So here's an important and it's in Silas Rao's book. He talks about this. And when you look at it, you're just like, whoa, it's just like 200 species become extinct every day.
Mm.
We mow down, one football field of the Amazon every second. It's like that bad. So 10,000 years ago, there were 200 million metric tons of wild animals. So you got that figure, 200 million metric tons. At that time, 10,000 years ago, there were about 1 million humans, Homo sapiens, on Earth. If you weighed them all out, came out to about 50,000 tons. So that's 4,000 times more of the wild animals compared to humans. Okay. Fast forward to 1970. 1970, the population of humans went from 50,000 metric tons to 200 million metric tons.
Wow.
The same as the wild animals 10,000 years ago. The wild animals went from 200 to 80 million tons. Fast forward just 40 years after that, 2010, humans double. They go to 400 million metric tons, and the wild animals go from 80 to 40 million metric tons. And the animals, to feed those humans, the 400 million metric tons of humans, is 2 billion metric tons of animal feed.
Wow.
And a lot of that animal feed's genetically modified. So it's like, that's, I mean, if you look at it on a chart and a map, you can clearly see that this is it's an unsustainable system that we have. I
Mhm.
mean, we kill 70 billion animals. That's not including the fish every year for 70 wait a second, how is that possible? 70 billion. There's only, 8 billion humans on Earth, and that's how much. I mean, it's crazy. So again, my job as part of the Earth's immune system is to sort of spread the word, try to, inspire people, get people thinking about different things, and you know it's possible to change things around. It could be. And so, as Silas Rao said in his book, we are like a caterpillar. Caterpillar has basically consumed all of the leaves on the tree that it's on, whatever tree, it's a mulberry tree, eats all the leaves. So that's what humans have done. We've cut down all the trees. We've desertification of various places. Uh, but then what happens is that that caterpillar gets so full that it forms a cocoon, and then once it forms the cocoon, it then liquefies. The imaginal cells basically liquefy the caterpillar. And then 2 weeks later, it comes out as a butterfly. And what does the butterfly do? It sips the nectar of the flower. So it doesn't eat all the leaves on the tree. And Silas believes that the humans have that capability of converting, like overnight, like very quickly, from the caterpillar stage that we've been in for most of human existence to the butterfly stage. And I like to think people like Ram Dass are part of that program and such. So anyway, just some food for thought for your
Yeah.
viewers there.
Yeah, I like that butterfly analogy. Never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't think the 70 billion number includes the animals they kill to protect the livestock either. The horses, the wolves, the
Yeah.
coyotes,
Oh man.
badgers, there's a whole web of different levels of killing
Right.
that takes place for that too. So it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny, like most everyone loves horses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, in that documentary, Cowspiracy, they go in there a little bit and they talk about, basically that the horses, wild horses need a certain amount of land,
Mm-hmm.
and we're taking all that land away from them and we're killing them. They made a movie my uncle was in, called The Misfits. You're
Mm.
probably too young.
Yeah, I
Uh,
haven't heard of it.
so the Misfits was a great movie. My uncle was Eli Wallach,
Hmm.
and Eli Wallach, Clark Gable, Marilyn Monroe, and Montgomery Clift. Those are the four stars.
Oh.
And the basic essence of the movie is like a love story between, Clark Gable and Marilyn Monroe. So that's part of it. But the other part is that they're out in the West, in Wyoming or Montana, and Clark Gable's bragging about breathing fresh air and being out in nature and just smelling the coffee. And what they're doing is they're actually rounding up wild horses and turning them into dog food.
Mm.
And Marilyn Monroe finds out about what they're actually doing, because it seems like, oh, they're just rounding up the wild horses. No, they're rounding them up and then killing them and then turning them into dog food.
Wow.
And she finds out and she goes bazonkers. She ain't happy about that situation. So
Mm-hmm.
when people, see that, I think they get more impressed, and it makes a strong impression on them. And I think that's sometimes really important, that people have the golden retriever I talked about earlier. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
that's really awful. And horses, and it's like, and one of the things, well, I only eat, free ranging, cattle and stuff. And it's like, well, that's actually worse for the environment,
Yeah.
because it takes more acreage and more resources. They don't kill them until they're a couple of years old, as opposed to like a year old when they're CAFOD, concentrated animal feedlot organization. So it's like, oh, that's, and, they talk about that in Cowspiracy, that, wow, if everyone was going to eat like the average American, which is 206 pounds of meat every year, we're going to need about 3.5 Earths to do that. It's like,
Right.
and we'd have to convert like all the forests to, cattle grazing. It's like, I mean, it's absurd. When you actually break down all the statistics, it's like no brainer. Like, okay. And I mean, the beauty of, what you do, and, which is great. That's why I wanted to come on your show, is, I mean, being able to, promote, plant-based diet, I think is an essential ingredient for human civilization to survive. And, we have to not kill everything. So I mentioned before, different ways to skin a cat, kill two birds with one stone. I converted that to feed two birds with one seed. So I have a whole list of expressions that I've converted, because, beating a dead horse, it's like, toasting burnt toast would be a better choice. Uh, you
Nice.
know, but there's so many expressions that we have, like, let's kill time. Like, no, you don't want to kill anything. And I think, the word of veganism, and there's obviously there's, people like those vegans, they're so self-righteous and stuff. I mean, you know, not being self-righteous, there's a great video that was done on the origins of veganism, and the origin, I'm trying to remember the video now. And basically it was, first coined in, I think it was what year was it, 1956 or
Ye-
53? I think
uh,
it's when the term vegan got first coined.
yeah, one of the I have a sweatshirt. It says it on it, but I can't remember now.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's right around there. 1942, 1946, in that time.
Hmm.
And originally it was a health thing, the veganism. And then there was a takeover of the membership, and then it got converted into an ethical thing, which is not a bad thing, but turned a lot of people off that were just like into health.
Hmm.
And I think since that time, it's regrouped, and now I think we have a pretty good balance. We know about the nutritional benefits of a fully plant-based diet, and we know about the ethics. That's kind of a no-brainer and stuff.
Yeah.
But again, for human evolution, I think this is going to be a really critical stage for us to turn into the butterfly that we're hopefully destined to be.
Yeah.
So,
Agreed.
yeah.
Well, terrific. I absolutely loved this talk that you gave, and the 6 pillars that you went over. Super helpful and informative. Do you have just a little bit of time to do a quick Q&A?
Yeah, of course.
All right, perfect.
Sure thing.
Let's hop over into the Q&A room. And one more time before we get into the questions here, remember all the links for Dr. Marz's website, his Instagram, his YouTube, they're all linked in the description box of this video. So please be sure to go follow Dr. Marz and learn from his videos and the resources he's putting out for people. All right, let's pull up here. I know there was a few earlier.
They probably fell asleep.
Or I don't know. I don't think so. I think they're
Uh,
probably taking notes. Janet did say, where can she find books by Dr. Marz? Do you have books that are available for the public, or is it just for academic institutions?
I mean, I have a whole reading list that I'm happy to share. I'll send them to you.
Okay.
And it's a pretty, because I'm old, it's a pretty long list of books. I know I always think about like my students, young students, thinking about like, wow, you got a lot of catching up to do, like movie documentaries, which I think are critical, and then books. And so, almost every patient of mine walks out of the office with my recommended reading list, and then I highlight certain books that I want them to read or, documentaries that I would like them to see. And, and then I quiz them when they come back, because I want them to be, not just watch it, but, pay attention.
Yeah.
Some of these, like, I think What the Health, I think I've probably watched it maybe 30 times or so. I've shown it to students and whatnot. Like there's one on genetically modified foods. Uh, The Future of Food was written, it was done by, directed by Jerry Garcia's wife, Linda Garcia. And the premiere showing was here in Portland at one of our local theaters, 2007. And to me, wow, that's a really important one to know and to understand the ramifications, because it has far-reaching implications to today, like all the genetically modified foods that we eat,
Yeah.
etc.
All right. Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you for that. Let's see. Judith says, what type of straw do you have in your drinking vessel?
Straw. Oh, my purple bottle.
I think so, yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. It's plastic. Wow, see, busted. Another thing. I mean, so when I travel and I do my lectures and stuff, I hate plastic water bottles.
Uh-huh.
It's a funny thing. I was doing a week-long lecture at the Naturopathic School in Bridgeport, and I was getting ready to go to the airport, and one of the students came up to me and she had a case of uh Aquafina water
Hmm.
or Dasani, I can't remember, one of the two. And she gave me the bottle. She meant well. And I said, this Dasani is Coca-Cola water, right? You know that. She grabbed the bottle out of my hand. She said, not everything is a conspiracy, And I'm like, it's not a conspiracy, but read the label on the bottle. It's just Coca-Cola makes it. It's in a plastic bottle. So uh yeah, so it's a plastic straw that's in the water. That, you know, when I don't usually travel with this particular bottle. So I have a stainless steel cap that goes on my stainless steel water bottle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I use when I drink at conferences. I don't
Sure.
use the straw. So, but that's an excellent point, because you don't want a plastic straw in water just staying there for, days on end.
Sure.
It's going to leach into the water,
Yep.
you know. Not much. I mean, I don't ever taste it or anything, but
Uh-huh.
it's a good point.
Sure. All right. Thanks for that question. Let's see. Scrolling through here, there's a lot of people loving the information you're putting out, or that you covered. So a lot of great comments here. Extropian Transhuman says, "What kind of berries were you referring to that you eat?"
They're called salal berries. So one of the things that I'll send to you is I have top 20 foods in the world to eat.
Mm.
And I mean, it's obviously a very limited list, and and one of the foods on there is salal, Salal, called salal berries. And they're little purple berries, and they're a little tart. if you get them perfectly ripe, they can be sweet. But it's a great one. It's kind of replaced. Maki berry was my favorite berry because it was a purple berry down in South America and from Chile. And a friend of my colleague was actually making an extract that we used to sell. It was a maki berry extract. So maki berries are also dark purple and they're small, and they have one of the highest ORAC values.
Mm.
ORAC stands for oxygen radiant absorbent capacity, and it's a measurement of antioxidant potential of a particular food. And so the higher the ORAC value, the better. So, there's certain herbs that have really high levels. Cinnamon and clove have high ORAC values and such. So, and that's, what we want to consume to protect us, from cancer and heart disease and all that stuff, Alzheimer's, etc. Another a book I didn't mention, The Sure's Eyes.
Mm.
A neurologist. I think the other one is, see, a cardiologist. I can't remember. But they're two medical doctors, and they wrote the book, The Alzheimer's Solution. And in there, they go through like stuff that you can do to prevent Alzheimer's. And there's lots of things to do, but it's, definitely fully plant-based is what their recommendation is for that.
Okay, great. Extropian Transhuman also said this guest is honestly the best, living life to the fullest, doing so much. I look up to that.
Oh,
so there you
nice.
Yeah.
Gotta like that.
Yeah.
Although now in this age of artificial intelligence, so weird. It's like now we don't know if something's coming from someone or just being generated.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm not being artificially intelligently created. I can tell you that. So, I mean, so there's a book, Singularity, by Raymond Kurzweil.
Okay.
And in there, he basically describes what's happening now is that humans will be merging with machines.
Mm.
And, if you don't merge with machines, you'll be left behind. And we could see that, the cell phone. And, he talks about, I mean, in the 1960s, they had these computers that were the size of big buildings, and now our telephone is 1,000 times more potent than one of those computers. And look how small it is. So eventually it's going to be the size of a chip, and then we'll just implant it right behind the ear. And when we need to get access to our bank account or information, we'll just nudge that little chip over there and get that information. And if you don't have one, you'll be stupid.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, maybe that's not so bad. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's movies about that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely, it's a strange time that we live in.
Yeah.
For sure.
That is for sure.
Yeah.
Let's see. Extropian Transhuman says, "What can we do?" Or she said, "Is Dr. Marz raw vegan?"
I'm not a raw vegan, but I am vegan and I'm proud of it. I did, when I went to Icaria, there was a famous chef. This was a few years ago. I think I want to say 4 years ago, while I was vegan. And I did, Father had sinned. I had this chef had made special for us this goat feta.
Hmm.
And I had some goat feta there. But other than that, been pretty clean, pretty 100% plant-based. Yeah.
Nice. She also says, "What does he recommend for consuming for top athleticism?"
Well, again, so the amount of protein that we actually require is not any more than what the average American's getting. So the RDA, as I mentioned, is 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight. And, most people are consuming 1.2 grams per kilogram body weight. So if you look at, world class bodybuilders and such, the amount more of protein that they require is about 10% more than what the average person's getting.
Hmm.
So, which means that we're already getting too much protein. So I recommend, for top athletes, making sure one, that you're eating foods that are tolerable digestive wise. So that could take a little bit of, exploration. But certainly, what we know about the blue zones, eating some type of bean, with every meal is probably critically important. So that could be lentils, it could be black beans, pinto beans, lima beans, kidney beans. I mean, all down the list. So, and the darker, the better. So I stayed when I was teaching in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I stayed with a family, Indian family that basically knew like I was the nutrition guy. So they brought out the black lentils for me, and I was like, oh, nice. Because normally, like, for more elegant, proper food, they bring out the light colored stuff. And so for me, they knew, okay, brown rice and black lentils. And I was like, okay. So, yeah. So making sure that you have a good supply of foods. I mean, because it can be difficult as an athlete to get enough calories. When I was on that 10,000-mile bike trip, uh, we guesstimated that we burned anywhere from 7 to 9,000 calories a day.
Hmm.
I mean, I did a 202-mile day one day. That was kind of crazy. So when you're burning that many calories, it's really almost impossible to eat that many calories. I mean, there's not enough time or ability of your jaw to chew that much food. So I think that's, like eating a salad. Actually, it's funny, I'll send you a picture of that salad that I made.
Yeah.
Uh, and, I actually timed how long it took me to eat the salad because when I was curious. And it was about 50 minutes that it took me to eat that salad. That's kind of a lot of time,
Yeah.
just salad part,
Yeah.
and I had added some beans in there and some, but it's takes a little bit of an effort. So I would say, in terms of an athlete, I would recommend doing some juicing.
Hmm.
So the juicing is going to be a way that you can get extra amounts of potassium, which is critical for your muscles, and also going to get some extra calories in there. So, we're not, athletes are not quite as worried about getting too many calories. Most of them, it's getting enough calories is what you want. You don't want to lose that body mass that you have. So that's important. But, so source, I have a number of recipes that I've created, like cream of buckwheat, which is, and I've measured out how much fiber is in there. And it's got pomegranate seeds. And if you got salal berries or blackberries, right now they're in season here, put them in there. Flax seeds, really important. The flax seeds add extra fiber and also essential fatty acids. Uh, Pecans and walnuts. Walnuts have omega-3 fatty acids. So, we went out to eat yesterday at this little breakfast place. And one of the things that I got was a side of black beans. That was great. And it was, delicious. It's really good. And we had some sauteed veggies, so they weren't raw. But I think, going with a diet that's partially raw is essential. I think, like a good example is broccoli. Broccoli is from the brassica family, and this family is very protective against various types of cancers. And this is a kind of a fascinating little note. So in broccoli, there's a an important enzyme called myrosinase. So in broccoli, there is a compound called glucosinolate. So glucosinolate gets converted by myrosinase, this enzyme, into sulforaphane. Sulforaphane is the active ingredient at protecting your cells from becoming cancerous. And so if you eat frozen broccoli, so when they freeze food, they have to blanch it, usually at 190 degrees. You kill off all that myrosinase. So when you eat the frozen broccoli, you're not really getting a full effect of the sulforaphane. So you need to, one, make sure that you don't overcook your broccoli. Steaming it's the best way to do it. And two, make sure that you chew it well, because the myrosinase enzyme becomes activated when you chew the broccoli. And incidentally, I have a photograph that I show my patients of a plate of broccoli. And, it's a big, it's quite a mound of broccoli. And it's a test question. It's like, well, how much protein is in that broccoli? And, most people like, well, it's vegetable, doesn't really have any protein in there. And they'll guess, maybe 5 grams of protein. And the correct answer is 27 grams of protein. And so if you remember, I think on What the Health, they showed a plate of rice and broccoli. They actually got the amount wrong. It was more like 116 grams of protein were in those two sample foods. And it's like, wow, that's a lot of, So why is all this talk? So one of the books that is on my reading list is called Proteinaholic by Garth Davis. He's a medical doctor. He's a gastro surgeon. He's actually into bariatrics. It's down in Texas. And in there, he tries to talk about why we're so obsessed with making sure we get enough protein. So not necessary most of the time, but you want to eat what Roy Walford categorized. And he was the one I told you that studied calorie restriction and taught Walter Longo. And his thing was a Cron diet: calorie restriction, optimal nutrition.
Mm.
So, and I think you can put juicing as optimal nutrition, because you are going to extract certain nutrients that maybe aren't quite as bioavailable if you eat it in its whole natural state. So there is an advantage to juicing. And, many anti-cancer programs, Max Gerson, would use these raw juices in their treatment. So anyway, I don't know if
Yeah.
that answers that question, but that's I think, diversifying your diet. And, I don't think there's a specific diet for athletes, but as long as you tolerate it well and it's not causing digestive problems.
Terrific. Thank you. Extropian Transhuman made a good point. She said broccoli sprouts as well would be a good source.
I'm sorry yeah.
No, go
So
for it.
broccoli sprouts have 100 times more glucosinolate than regular broccoli. So a shout out to using sprouts. In fact, I have some growing out on my deck, some broccoli sprouts that I will
Nice.
consume later today. So yeah, excellent point. Sprouts are an amazing source of nutrients, and broccoli sprouts are one of the greatest.
For sure.
Definitely in the top 20 foods.
Yes. Okay, last question here from Valley Tom. Valley says, Dr. Marz mentioned curing his hay fever after fasting. I'm wondering what type of fast was this and how long was the fast?
Well, so the story was that I was in Great Falls, Montana, where I was practicing, and I would be out training on my bike during triathlon season in June, and I would sneeze like 30, 40 times in a row, to the point where I had all this mucus, and sometimes I'd even have to go home, go to bed, because I'd just be like exhausted. And so I decided that, wait a second, June, that's the biggest month of my allergies, and that's the grass season. So I'm going to eliminate grass from my diet. So that would be wheat, barley, corn, oats, all those things. And then I said, screw that. I'm just going to not eat. So the first time I did this, I went sort of like not knowing what to expect. And I started it on June 1st. Amazingly, my hay fever symptoms like officially would start rain or shine every June 1st. So this particular year, I said, I'm going to start fasting on June 1st. So second day, third day, and this was a juice fast. I did apple juice was my first one.
Mm.
And then fourth day, and I'm noticing like, my nose slightly itchy, but no sneezing. And my eyes weren't like itchy and stuff. When you're out on a bicycle, you get exposed to a lot more of the pollens and stuff in the air. So it makes it worse. And so I'm like, wow, this is kind of amazing. So a week goes by and I'm like, well, how long am I going to fast? And I'm thinking like, if I don't have any hay fever, I'll just keep fasting until ever, till the hay fever season goes away. I didn't, I think I ended up fasting that first time a couple of weeks.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh, okay. And then when I started eating again, of course, I was eating, a modified hypoallergenic diet where I wasn't eating wheat and some other grains and whatnot. And I noticed that the effects of the fast continued, like after I stopped the fast. So that, that really got me going. And I don't know how, it's probably been more than 25 years. Every June 1st, I start my fast. And the longest I've gone is 3 weeks, and doing water. But, mostly I do juice fasting. And last few years, I've been doing some fasting with broth. And
Mm.
that's what they use at the Buhinger fasting clinic in Germany. So, my advice would be, start out with a 5-day fast and see how you feel. And if it's, feels really good, and there's a lot of parameters, obviously, you want to keep into consideration. Medications that you want can get kind of complicated. If you're on different medications and stuff, you want to, be careful about that because that can run you into some problems. So, but, I tell people 5-day fast, that's your first fast. That's going to get your whistle wet. Dr. Longo made a fasting kit that you can do. I don't know of its effects specifically on hay fever allergies. I would say the juice fast would be more effective, but he has what's called Prolon fasting kit, where you eat these little packets of food. Every day is about 700 calories. So you're getting some calories, but it's limited calories and it's not 100% hypoallergenic. So I like the juice fast for allergies and hay fever, and start out with 5 days. Everyone could do 5 days for sure.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Janet did slip one last question in. Do you have an opinion about coconut water, store-bought coconut water? Do you think that's okay to drink?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do yoga across town. I'll bike over there, and sometimes after yoga, I will go stop off at our New Seasons and get some coconut water. Coconut water is really high in potassium. I think potassium is a really critical nutrient, and it's something that most people don't get enough of. We should be getting 7 or 8 grams a day of potassium. So I'm not a super big fan of coconut oil. I mean, I think coconut oil can be useful, but I like coconut water, unsweetened coconut water. In answer to your question, I would give it a good grade as something that would be nutritious, especially because of the potassium. The FDA won't allow any more than 99 milligrams of potassium to be put into a tablet. So it's limited. And that's to protect the public. Too much potassium, and you can get diarrhea and nausea, and your heart can beat irregularly if you overdose. So getting it from food, you can't overdose on potassium from food, basically.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much for the talk and as well answering the questions. I'm just gonna quick do a random scroll through of the chat here, and if it lands on somebody that asks a question, that is who is gonna take home the giveaway prizes.
All right.
And we've got Janet Andrews. So there you go, Janet. Send
All
me
right, Janet.
send me an email at matt@myrawintuition.com, and I'll get you any of my ebooks that you would like. And then should I just forward that email over to you, Dr. Marz, and you can hook Janet up with the...
Yeah, I'll send her down to my people.
Okay.
And they'll send her out a bottle. I'll sign it. I'll give you an autographed bottle of OxyQuench.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for the questions and for being here. Always appreciate you guys for sticking around and learning with us on Sunday afternoons or mornings. So, Dr. Marz, once again, thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom. I really appreciate it, and I can tell in the audience they've really appreciated it as well.
Great.
All right, guys.
All right.
Well,
thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Everybody else, we'll see you next week, same time, same place. And until then, always follow your raw intuition.